everybody, and welcome back to another exciting, fantastic, and most episode 2-iest episode of Let's Talk. I am your host, Laughingboy LP, and I am back with Sab Irene. Hello.
Hello.
And on the last episode, we talked about your background, got a little bit into the background of your personal history as well as your channel. Nothing too invasive. But today, we're going to go into the really invasive stuff. It's all the technical crap. All the equipment, all of the software, all the trials and tribulations that come with all of it. And we're going to start with, well, the beginning, I guess, really. This is where we can start. So first off, can you talk a little bit about your thought process when you decide on making a new cover? And this is more particularly for YouTube and just kind of your thought process on that.
Right. So the way that I kind of approach covers is I tend to like to cover stuff from games that I've played, or that's the direction I'm trying to move in, just because, you know, there's normally a emotional connection, you know, there's resonance with the piece of music. And then from there, sometimes it's just kind of random, honestly, where I'll be listening to something or I'll hum something and I'll get an idea, you know. They kind of come out of thin air because when I sit and try and think about it, normally they don't come. But I've been playing a lot of Xenoblade, so I've been like very into like, yeah, let's just cover a whole bunch of Xenoblade music. But when that's not happening, there are just times where I think of songs or I'm like playing something on an instrument. I'm like, oh my God, what if I did, you know, this song like this? Or I'll be listening to a song from just like a band that I really like or a group and I'm like, this kind of sounds like this. I could do a cover of this song. So it's fairly random. I can't like sit down and be like, okay, I need to come up with the cover, because every time I've ever done that, it doesn't work. So normally I pick the song just because I like it. There's an emotional connection to it, and just really trying to figure out how to make it mine.
So it is very much like kind of sudden or relevant kind of just inspirations that come up.
Pretty much.
Awesome. And can you kind of explain a bit, I know this is very broad and, you know, question to ask for a topic like this, but can you kind of like explain a little bit about how that arrangement writing process goes?
Yeah. So, again, like it's kind of situational, but broad strokes, what I tend to try and do is when I'm thinking of a song, I try to think of just one part to start where I'm just like, okay, well, I kind of would want to arrange like, let's say like Kokiri Forest, the that song. And if I'm like, all right, well, if I want to do this like in a funk style, like, you know, I'm already think so and go like, bum 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 ba-dia ba-dia ba 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 doo ba da ba da ba 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 da bum. You know, I try to sing that and I'm like, okay, how would I write that now? And I'll like go into my notation program, or sometimes I'll sing it just so I don't forget it and like record it. So I kind of like choose one thing to start on, because it can be overwhelming when you're just like, okay, I'm going to do this, and you like input a bunch of instruments into a notation program and you're like, where do I even start? So I like to really try and focus on getting the concept, or even just like taking one part and running with it and then fleshing it out as I go. There are times where I'll like write a few measures of something and then I'm like, ooh, and then this instrument can do this in response. And I think about, what do I have access to? And then if I start to think a little bit about like, well, I don't have these instruments, or like I don't play these instruments well, what can I do? Like, you know, reaching out to people, etc. So that's kind of how the process starts, is, you know, I get the idea and I try to take just one piece and let that be the starting point and growing it from there, rather than trying to write everything all at once.
Right. I think that's a very like intelligent way of thinking about it. I really, when you are given a concept or when you have to think of something to do, you're only thinking about it as the holistic approach, and it can be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
So just kind of finding that starting point and being able to work from it from there is probably the best way to go about it.
And that doesn't mean that there aren't moments where I try to just be like, all right, let's do this all. And then I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, why did I do this? So then I try to like take a step back. And sometimes I just have to like walk away from it for like a few weeks, a few months. And then I can kind of revisit it with clearer vision and be like, okay, this is what we did last time. Let's think about like something different that we can do to help, move this along.
On top of that, how has your background and your education in music theory helped you in writing these arrangements? Especially since we talked about you have kind of like a before and after in your own videos.
Right. I would say that the background in education helps me a lot because that's how I kind of even devised the system of like just really focusing on one part at a time. It's something I had always done, but I've been a lot more attentive to it because I worked with middle school kids in my student teaching, and I would like have these goals for them, but I wouldn't have a way from them to get to point A to point C. I would just be like, all right, here's A, get to C. And not really think about the goals and the steps along the way, and I would just kind of throw too much at them. So I kind of thought about how that can translate to my work, and I'm like, well, sometimes I kind of do that, and I just throw a lot of things into an arrangement, or like I try to start with too many things. I'm like, think about starting with one thing and kind of that being the focus for that moment in time. So I think that's how the education stuff has helped me. As for the music theory, it kind of can just make the process go a little bit faster because so much of music theory, I think like at its fundamental form is that it's just our way of putting concrete labels to music, like because music is an abstract thing, so it's our way of putting concrete labels to the abstract nature of music, and it's really more about how the music makes us feel instead of all the jibber jabber of like, whoa, we are in C Ionian and we are going 1-4-5-1. Like that is music theory, but that's like super deep stuff that isn't necessary. Like I think if you can talk about how a piece of music makes you feel, that's music theory. So like sometimes I just hear certain chords and I'm like, that's a minor 4. Like, ooh, that's a chromatic median. So sometimes it just helps expedite the process and like all the practice of doing like harmonic dictations and melodic dictations and like music school of like, okay, I'm going to play a melody. You need to write it out. You get X amount of attempts. And even though I have unlimited in my job, using those same skills, we're trying to follow like a musical line or like what an instrument is doing, starting with like the outer stuff first, so like the bass line and the melody, like kind of using those tools to help the arranging transcription process go by a little bit faster, and just knowing like, hey, this is a good voicing, and like knowing, okay, I'm gonna break that rule right now, kind of having the rules as a foundation, but knowing that I can break them when I see fit.
Well, and yeah, I think, again, like, as you said, music theory is just putting names to things that we kind of already intrinsically understand as people who listen to things.
Yep.
And we know what we like. And there's usually a pattern to those things that we like. It's just that somebody kind of gave definitions and meaning to those things.
Right.
And so you're able to kind of be like, this typically works, but then how am I able to either... can I go with that, or is there a way to kind of make it different in a way that still sounds good? I mean, there's still certain like quote unquote fundamental rules that they're just like, you just don't break that. But even then we have musicians that have written great pieces that specifically break those rules.
Yeah, exactly. There's suggestion.
Exactly. So yeah, it really just gives like the name to the thing that we know, but haven't really we never really think about it. So. All right, and that's, so in terms of picking the song and what you would think to do in terms of creating the actual arrangement, we're going to move from there to the actual recording process in terms of the software and hardware that you use. So first, let's talk equipment. So besides the instruments themselves, what equipment do you use to record your audio and video?
So I use an Audio-Technica, so an AT2020 microphone. I use it for everything, which is partially what I love about it so much, is that I can use it for all my instruments. Sometimes, like, using a condenser versus a ribbon microphone is better for instruments depending on, like, the frequencies and just, like, where the instrument kind of sits, how you play it, whether you have, like, a dark tone or a bright tone. just picking the things that really highlight what you're looking for. So I love getting to use the AT2020 for everything. I use my nice Audio-Technica headphones. I think they're the M50s. I've had these for a long time, and I hope I get to, because I don't want to have to buy another pair anytime soon.
They're, a little pricey.
Yeah, all headphones are pricey now. It's so scary. But then I use Scarlett Focusrites for interfaces for my recording process. It doesn't really matter if you use like a solo versus a 2i2. I have both. Sometimes I have to have the 2i2 if I'm using two microphones because it has two inputs. And then as for my video stuff, I use a Canon Rebel T5i that I've had for like 5 years now. Some lights, like I have an umbrella light right now, but I want to get some softboxes because they're way better, and I can afford it now, which is nice. I don't actually know the name of I have mixing monitors that were hand-me-downs, as is most of my equipment is hand-me-downs from friends who don't need it anymore. But I've never owned mixing monitors until like 2 months ago, and it totally changed my life because I always mixed on headphones, which is really good, but you hear so many different things when you use mixing monitors. Kind
of going off of that, what are the kind of equipment recommendations that you could make for people who are starting out, kind of remembering, where we all came from?
Oh, absolutely.
And what would you recommend then for creators who do want to take their videos to the next level?
I would say that, like the Blue Yeti mic, like whether you do like a Snowball or like the Blue Snowball or the Blue Yeti, they're USB microphones. They're really solid, and they're on the cheaper side, like $100 or less. They're a really good place to start, and they're really they're durable microphones kind of thing, because I'm a klutz, so sometimes I've dropped microphones, thankfully on carpet most of the time, but they can take a hit or two, even because people are like, well, what about videos? I'm like, honestly, phones, the stuff that phones can do nowadays is mind-blowing, because I think about my first phone and the camera on my first phone versus like iPhones have super nice cameras, like Google, Samsung phones. I don't think there's anything wrong with starting with using your phone as a way to record, because the technology inside phones is crazy.
Yeah, and I think the purpose of asking this question is specifically because when it comes to equipment and when it comes to these recommendations, one of the things that when I had started this, it was such a big concern, especially when it came to video capture with LPs.
Right.
But the idea that you have to have
the best equipment, yeah.
Yeah, in order to just start out, kind of creates this, like, I can't be good unless I have a Stream Deck. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, well, you don't really need that because your keyboard does macros. Yeah. And you have a keyboard.
You can't become good unless you get experience, I think is the better way to look at it. But I know it's really easy to be like, well, this person uses this equipment. It's like, yeah, they've also been doing this a long time. So like, you have to think about asking the question, what did they start with? I think is like a good question to ask if you're trying to get into it. Not what do you have, but what did you start with? Because I don't think there's any sense of blowing a bunch of money on really pricey stuff, when you're first starting, because you're just gonna be like, oh, this sounds so bad, and like this person recommended, and you're more likely to kind of lose motivation and drive. So I think like, start with the simpler stuff, and if you really find that you want to continue and you get more invested in this, you can choose to invest more in the process, both your time and financially.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think in terms of like starting out, you really don't want to overinvest in something that you're just not sure about.
Exactly.
So there's that aspect to it as well. So in terms of like once you've kind of had the experience, you understand the equipment you already have better, are there any additional recommendations that you would make in terms of like increasing the value or the production value and stuff like that?
Not that I can really think of. I guess, if you've been doing it a while and you really, are passionate about it, start to think about setting some money aside for things, but also try and be, again, like, think about like your upgrades as kind of like stepping stones, where like, you know, you can start with like a Blue Yeti, but then don't be like, okay, I'm gonna jump and use an AEA microphone, which like they're over $1,000. Like, no, think about like looking like, you know, my AT2020 was only $80.
Yeah,
you know, I got it for a steal. They were like at PAX and they were doing sales, and I was like, I will take this. But you know, just thinking about it, it's like just because you have $1,000 microphone too doesn't necessarily mean like that it's any better than an $80 microphone. Like, you know, if you know how to use the equipment, like I'm also a cheapskate, so like I don't upgrade for like I used the same microphone for 5 years, and the reason why my stuff sounds different over 5 years is because I learned how to actually set up a microphone better, how to like, you know, in relation to my instrument, and like how to mix, like because I learned other things. Like, give the equipment time, I would say, because it's really easy to dismiss it saying like, oh, this is bad. It's like, well, if you keep doing it for a long time, maybe, but like, you know, chances are it's just that you are inexperienced and you just need to learn how to use the equipment. It's like learning how to use a new phone.
Yeah, exactly. And you won't know half of the things until you've started experimenting and just playing around.
Exactly.
And again, like that, not having that fear of failure.
Right.
Perfect answer. And actually, I think I kind of missed one of these things because you mentioned notation software.
Right.
Can you go a little bit more details about what that's like and what recommendations you have on those?
Yes. I was actually just talking to a student about this morning. So I use MuseScore. I've been using it for almost a decade, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But what I like about MuseScore is that it is free and that you can use it on, you know, Mac, PC, whatever. So it's easy when most of my students use PC and I use a Mac, that I don't have to like use a separate program than them. And it's free. Like, you know, Sibelius is really good, but it's super expensive, and MuseScore does everything I needed to do. So basically in MuseScore, I can write out things and I can like also play it back so I can hear. So if I'm trying to write something and I'm not sure if I wrote it out correctly, I can play it back what I wrote out so I can hear it. You pretty much like add any instrument, so you can hear what certain things sound like. If you're writing for an orchestra, instead of just writing it all for piano, like you can actually write it for strings, and they have like the string sound fonts. Like, you know, do they sound the best? No, but it gives you an idea. There's a lot of pretty cool things that you can do in MuseScore. So like, you know, it has served me well. And I still, you know, I'm going to use it because I like it better than most other free softwares out there.
Yeah. And I mean, once you've gained that experience with the software, it's usually hard to go to a new software anyway.
Exactly. So I know how this works, and it's like, you know, students struggle with it initially, but then once I walk them through it and I teach them all the shortcuts that I use, they're like, oh, this is so much easier. I'm like, yeah. And then I think like the other thing I'll mention, since like is my DAW, my digital audio workstation, which is what I use to record all my covers, like where all my project files are kept. I use Reaper. Reaper is free. You know, and again, you can use it on Macs, you can use it on PC. That's another benefit when I'm teaching online a lot, and I have students who use all kinds of things. I don't have to worry about the Mac PC crap. Like, you know, we can all use the same things, and it's okay. They look the same. So it makes everyone's lives easy, and I'm all about the free stuff because, like I said, I am a huge cheapskate. So, like most of my stuff I got as hand-me-downs, not because I asked. It's just that friends were upgrading, and I like hold out so long to get new equipment. I was like, well, I want to wait till I really need it, and I probably have like needed it for years, and I've just like opted not to get it. Works out in my favor, I guess.
Yeah. And actually, just a quick aside for the interview, but what is a DAW? And if you can explain that for viewers that are kind of getting into things.
So a DAW...
And me.
Yeah. So a DAW is a digital audio workstation. So if you've ever heard of something like GarageBand or Logic, it's basically a place where you can record all your stuff. Like if you have like a microphone, like you can record, you know, like the audio files. So like the things that, like the way, like the audio formations, you get what I'm talking about, where like it could be a small thing or like a thick brick. I'm really bad at explaining this stuff. Or you can
Do
like
a thick brick.
Yeah. or MIDI, which is musical instrument digital information. I'm definitely messing up that acronym, but basically it's where you have like virtual instruments, and if you're like playing on a keyboard or a synthesizer, like whatever you're playing, it'll do. It won't look the same as an audio file. It'll just be a series of rectangles because it's like you're coding the information. And it allows you to put effects on it to kind of restore what is lost when you record. Because there's only so many things that a microphone can kind of capture, that you are kind of restoring what things would sound like in a live situation or if you didn't have to record. So, we do things like we put an equalizer on it to like kind of cut out some frequencies, but boost the frequencies that are like really strong in our instrument or just that particular place, putting reverb so things kind of blend and, sound warm, balancing out the audio levels of everything. That's kind of like the DAW crash course, is that you can do a lot of different things in it, but it helps you kind of keep track of all your parts as you're kind of making music or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Cool. I'm glad.
So you're recording inside of your home. Mm-hmm. What considerations are you trying to make in order to ensure the best quality audio recording?
Doing it when people aren't around. I think that's the biggest thing. I lived by myself for a year, and I loved it so much because I didn't have roommates. I didn't have to worry about people like knocking on my door. Like, it was my sanctuary. And then I'm always trying to think about the people that I live with because I never want to inconvenience them, even though this is my job now. So, if they're just like, well, I'm just doing my job, which, they've grown to become a lot more respectful of it. And I'm eternally grateful that they support my wacky YouTube ventures. But yeah, I would just say like thinking just about when people are home versus when they're at work. So like, thankfully, both people who live in the house with me, they like actually need to leave the house to go to their job during these times. So like I have 8 solid hours where I can just kind of like, I can schedule my day and be like, okay, I'm going to get up and I can practice at 9 a.m. versus COVID. I would like living in an apartment, I would wait till like 2-3 p.m. because, people's schedules around me, my roommates, I think like that's the biggest consideration, and just trying to find the space for everything, because I have very clunky furniture, so I'm just trying to organize things so that I have a good workflow and having an area that's really designated for work versus when I am like sitting on my bed playing Xenoblade like a couch potato. So I think those are the biggest considerations, is just kind of the accommodation to the others in the house, being respectful of their time and having them be respectful of my time. Thankfully, don't have to deal with too many like lawnmowers, even though I live in a suburb. Because I know that's a common complaint with so many friends. They're like, those damn lawnmowers. I'm like, I don't have that issue that much. I just have a deaf
is there an
dog.
HOA or?
Yeah, like no. I just have a deaf dog who barks all the time, even though I'm like petting her, and I'm like, okay.
So moving on from the recording phase, we've recorded everything. We've got that done. We're gonna go into post. We've already talked a little bit about DAWs, but can you talk about what software you're currently using for that? And then again, I think you kind of went over this a little bit, but what software you would recommend for beginners in those terms?
So Reaper is what I use for all my audio stuff. So like for recording, for mixing, for mastering. So basically like those 3 things broken down are: recording is when I am like, playing my instruments, whether it's like a MIDI instrument like my keyboard or my physical instruments like the saxophone. And I have that in a project file where like everything is lined up according to how fast that I want this arrangement to go. And I have like a metronome that helps me keep everything together and lined up. So then once I get everything recorded, I start the mixing process, which is adding those effects, kind of restoring the things that are lost, and then just making sure things blend like you would hear in a regular ensemble setting. So like the equalizer, the reverb, compression to kind of make everything more balance. So like if I have a really quiet section, a really loud section, kind of like compressing it so that they're a little bit more balanced out. A limiter, which just kind of helps bump everything up, which I do in like my mastering. So there's like a whole bunch of things. Like I could add delay, I could add there's so many effects, but it's basically to polish up the recordings, because if the recordings don't sound good, you got to do them again. But it's not going to sound like a perfectly track that's ready to be exported. You have to kind of do some tweaking, balance things where, hey, this part's a little high, this part like needs to be brought up a little bit. And I would recommend Reaper again, just because it's free and it can be used on both Macs and PC. Like if you have GarageBand and you're on a Mac, GarageBand's really solid. If you want to pay for Logic, go for it. I never did. I just used GarageBand, and then when I heard about Reaper, I was like, whoa, this is way better. So and then for my video stuff, I use Premiere Pro. I used iMovie, but iMovie was very limiting for me. So it worked for a while though. But my brother started using Creative Cloud, and then when it got too expensive, my university was like, hey, we're gonna give everyone free Creative Cloud. I was like, thank God. Yeah, I know. But then as soon as I graduated, they're like, LOL, we're revoking your Creative Cloud. So like now I'm splitting it with a friend who like they were using my account as well. I was on their account when they were paying, and then when my university was offering it, they're like, can I also be on your account? I was like, yeah. So it's just been a back and forth of who's on whose account. But just splitting the cost because it's super pricey. But I can't speak for Windows Movie Maker. I've heard like mixed things. I mean, if you can make it work, you make it work. I don't know anything about it. And there's like Sony Vegas something. I've been on Mac, so I've only ever really worked with iMovie before Premiere Pro. But I'm all about the free stuff.
I haven't used Movie Maker in like 20 years.
Oh my God.
So I went from that to I'll just say it, stealing Premiere using the internet.
There you go.
Whatever.
I know people who do that.
I'm legit now. Who cares? So going from there to Premiere, I haven't really stopped using it since.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely like, I understand. Creative Cloud is nice in that it updates all the time on its own. You don't have to keep paying for it, but you are continuously paying for it.
Right.
If you can get a student edition license, please do it.
Highly recommend. See if if any of you are in college, I highly recommend you see if your university offers it.
Yeah.
That was like, when I heard that, I was like, screw iMovie, we're going back to Premiere Pro.
Yeah, exactly. What does the editing process look like for you? We've talked about mastering the audio, but when we're moving into Premiere, can you kind of describe some of the video editing techniques that you like to employ frequently?
Yeah.
How you make your videos look the way that they do?
So one thing that definitely helps me is that if it's not saxophone or piano, saxophone and piano are the only things that I record live. So like when I am recording the actual audio that you hear in the covers, that's when I have the camera going, because those are just very nuanced compared to like if I'm recording vocals, flute, clarinet, I'm like playing the audio from my speakers or from my laptop, and I'm like playing along with it. Just to kind of get a cleaner video, because those are things that I can mimic a little bit easier compared to piano and saxophone. So then when we get into Premiere Pro, the first thing I do is I render out a rough draft of the audio, and then I sync every video like to it, and I make sure that I only keep the videos. So like if I make a mistake in something and I'm redoing it, I delete it so I don't have to sort through like for hours trying to find the correct takes, because that's what I used to do. I used to just keep everything and not know what was a good take.
Oh, right.
Because I didn't know any better. But so now like I actually have it organized, and it's like one video. It's like, in Premiere Pro there's like V1, V2, V3, V4, etc. Like you can keep adding things. I try to keep like an instrument to a track. So like piano tends to be like V1, and then like, alto saxophone versus tenor saxophone, clarinet, flute, all that stuff. Like I try to keep it all on one so that it's organized. Then I do an adjustment layer just to kind of help clean things up. So like I change the exposure, like I do like the the exposure, the contrast, the highlights, the shadows, just to kind of make it look a little bit cleaner, because even though my lights do a good job, it kind of makes it look like everything was done in the same place and gives it a cleaner finish. Then my big thing that I'm doing right now is I love particle effects. Because sometimes I don't have as much motion going on in the video, or even if I do, I just like the particles to have a sense of motion even in a video, because I don't move around a whole lot because I'm just trying to focus, because I get easily distracted when I record, and I want the camera to stay in focus.
Yeah.
That I like the particle effects to kind of reflect the speed and kind of the feeling that I'm going for, and then picking a color that correlates with it. So today I put out like Agneareth a Day from Xenoblade, and because like that city is very like bronze, golden, orange, like I did like orange particle effects with like a yellow highlight to kind of like give the atmosphere as if you were in that area of Xenoblade, and if it's like more of a battle theme, I try to pick a color that I think goes with it, like normally like a red or something. If it's something calming, like a blue or a purple, and then if something's fast, like I'll have fast particle effects, and I try to have them change throughout the video so that there feels like there's a sense of progression with these random particle effects.
Well, and just to add on to that, so for our viewers out there, the adjustment layer is something that it's basically like a transparent, let's say like you're putting a layer of glass on top of your video.
Yeah.
So you have one video layer in Premiere, and that may comprise of multiple clips. So instead of doing the same video effect on every single clip on the timeline and just keep going, you can do the adjustment layer over the area that you want to have those specific video edits or color corrections, and et cetera, and it will do that same effect on
everything in the timeline.
So it's a much faster way to incorporate multiple clips and having those like either color corrected or edited out. So
yes. Thank you. I totally forgot to explain that, and that was better than I would have probably explained it.
I wouldn't have if I hadn't started using it. I've been using Premiere for like, I don't know, like 15, 20 years, and there are certain things about it I still don't know yet.
Right.
So just happened to work out.
I think the only other thing that I would kind of include about the process is that when I'm video editing, because once I get everything synced up, it just blocks in the timeline of like a bunch of things. So then, the question is, well, how do you determine like when to show certain instruments? Because I used to be really big on like multi-shots, but there are just times where I feel like it's kind of unnecessary. I really like to focus on doing single shots where you just see one instrument at a time. But there's some moments where you really want the effect where you see the layers, not just hear them. So I'll like do border patterns to like help show things more.
Okay.
But I try to just pick the instrument that's being highlighted at that moment. And if there's a bunch, I just kind of like think about, well, when was the last time like, the flute video showed up? And if it was like 40 seconds ago and I just showed the clarinet video, I'm like, well, I'm not going to show the clarinet video again. I'll show the flute just for variety. I try to change things around every few seconds and make sure that you really can see all the parts that are happening. Because I used to have things sit way too long. I'm like, people don't have the attention span for this. And even I'm like getting sick of just looking at this one shot. So like I need to change it to something else.
Sometimes the simple stuff works.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just like if you want to have those big moments, if you do it all the time, it's going to lose its effect versus if you have mostly single shots and then you just have this one moment where it's like 15 videos at once. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
Kind of creating that effect, because if you're doing so many multi-shots, you're almost kind of normalizing it to the point where you're becoming desensitized to it, versus if you're always doing single shot stuff and then, again, just that one instance, it has a greater impact.
Yeah. It's a cool reveal.
Yes.
And then finally, in terms of posts, what do you usually like to do for your export settings? What are things that you try to look out for when exporting to YouTube in order to kind of keep up that quality?
Well, I'm kind of a lazy person, and because YouTube does put like their own style. Like, I've talked about it with friends, and I just totally spaced on what it is they do, but they do, like, compress the audio and put some things on it. So it's not going to sound exactly the way that, like, it's being exported. But I tend to do videos in, oh my god, I always mess up the ratio.
16:9?
Yes, 16:9, but I was trying to remember the particular, like, the pixels. I think it's like 1920 by 1080.
Yeah.
That sounds alright.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at, like I'm good at numbers, but I'm really bad at remembering, like, all the tech stuff. Like, that is definitely my weakest point. That's why I like mixing and, like, filming. Like, it's so tech heavy, and that's where you can really see the gaps in my knowledge, I'll put it. Like, if it was a brick wall, you could see, like, the bricks that are missing, and that, like, but the mortar is, like, around there or something, or, like, I have, like, just bricks stacked on top of each other without the mortar.
Yeah, that's just paper mache.
Yeah. And then for the audio stuff, like, I always export in WAV files. There's nothing wrong with MP3s. WAVs are just, like, a little bit higher quality. It's a very minute difference. It's not like it's super, like, people can hear the difference. At least I know I can't. And then, like, we have sample rates that we have to pay attention to, so that when we're collaborating, making sure that everything's at the same sample rate. Do I understand what that means? No. But I'm being honest, I have no idea. But making sure that it's all at the same rate, because otherwise when you play it back, it can sound like it's in a different key, or just things don't, they're not going to line up well together, or they're just going to sound a bit funky.
I've never thought about sample rate in terms of audio.
Oh, we've seen that happen quite a lot. If you go back and see the TRG Makes Music thing that Jules had to do, a lot of it, he was like, oh my god, what was the sample rate that they did this at? Because, like, it sounds off, like, compared to what he has it set to. Because it alters, like, I think, like, the pitch and stuff, so it sounded like things were in a different key. But he knows how to fix it. So he made it work, but...
I just give it to him.
Yeah, thankfully my stuff wasn't an issue, because I'm like, I've worked with Jules before, I know what he needs, and that's just my default, so I don't have to touch anything.
No, that's perfect. And it's, for me, I guess personally speaking, it's not something I typically worry about.
Yeah.
In most cases, I'm not worried about things like whether or not somebody's audio somehow appears faster. It tends to sync up pretty well, but, those kinds of things do happen.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Finally, we are uploading to YouTube. Got the last couple of questions here, and it's probably the least fun aspect. Originally, I like to talk about, like, well, how do you tag your videos? And everyone's usual response is like, what do you mean I don't? I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, you mean like the SEO stuff?
Oh, yeah. Search engine optimization has always led to, like, I don't know. It just works. But what we're going to try and talk about a little this time is... the whys and personal opinions of uploading and what makes sense in terms of content creation and the longevity. So first off, when or rather, how do you decide when to release a new video on your channel? Like, what times work best for you?
So when I started having a schedule, because I didn't start doing that till I was in college, because I was like, oh, what's the point in setting a schedule if I'm just gonna break it? But, like, having a schedule kept me very organized. So when I first started doing it, it was like Fridays at like 10 a.m. or something, but I'd have to, like, run out of my theory class, get to the lounge, and, like, make sure that everything was good, and, like, so I would be rushing. So I was like, okay, let's do 11 a.m. And, like, again, I just was, like, always rushing, because I was still, like, in school and had classes and stuff. So then I started pushing it to Saturdays, because it was nice that I could take Friday evenings and not be thinking about school and, like, polishing up anything that I had done in the week. And then that kind of left the question of what time, and I used to do 11 a.m., but someone that used to be at my MCN was like, I think you should upload, like, later, because you have a lot, like, so many of your friends upload like after you, but like, you know, you should be uploading after them because they have a higher chance of showing up as like the next autoplay video. I didn't really get what they were talking about, and I don't think it made a whole lot of sense. So I just changed it to be 2 p.m. So I have videos come out every other Saturday. I like Saturday because, you know, that's the weekend and I was in school for most of my career, so it made it easy for me to do it on Saturday when I didn't have to get up and go to school. To do that. Yeah. And I like 2 p.m. because it gives me time in the morning if I like haven't finished a video or have to do any last minute things like the thumbnail, to have time to do it that morning and not be too pressed for time. But it also works for a lot of time zones. Does it work like in Australia and like East Asia? No, but it works like in this, like, you know, 2 p.m. is a good time in EST where I am. It's good for PST. It's good for Europe. So like it works for a lot of the people who do watch my videos in the time zone. So it's middle of the day, and normally I'm not doing anything in the middle of the day. So it gives me something to also look forward to at like 2 p.m. I'm like, oh, I have a video coming out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to think about. You know, going into the analytics side of things, one of the most difficult aspects of YouTube is the analytics. Yeah. And it is a very good analytics tool that you get for free. But what do you do with that data? Like, right. I think one of the biggest problems and the biggest hiccups is you receive a lot of data and you're kind of like, okay, now what? And usually YouTube's response is like, I don't know.
They're just like, watch our seminars. And I'm like, I don't want to.
Well, and the funniest thing, they just added, one of their biggest improvements that they were touting was the time of day of which your viewers are watching your content or are watching content at all. So like they look at your subscribers and they look at the time frames of which they're online and watching videos. And it was a big deal because everyone was just kind of like, oh, okay, cool. That means then if I see a lot of people are watching my videos 5 p.m. on a Friday, or watching videos in general 5 p.m. on a Friday, then I should upload 5 p.m. on a Friday. And YouTube literally was like, no, it doesn't mean that. And so my assumption is that you either kind of have some feedback and knowledge that you know that these are different time zones of people that are looking to your channel, and you try to prioritize based off of that actual analytical piece of data that's telling you these are the kinds of people that are watching your content.
I would say that's a very accurate assessment. Because I try to think about, so there are times where I'm bummed where I can't watch like a video premiere or like, I can't watch a friend's stream because like it's too late for me, it's too early for me. So I try to think about that because like my stream schedule is like a little bit later for people like in Europe. But I always try to do like one stream a week that's like earlier because I used to do streams earlier, but a lot of people are like, well, I can't watch your streams because they're too early and I wake up late. And I'm like, So it's like finding that balance point where it's like, I actually like streaming later because like my brain is fried after streaming. So it's more incentive to get my work done for YouTube before jumping into streaming, where I'm like, okay, if you have to be getting set up by like 4:30 or like 4:45, you need to get all your recording work done in these hours. So it's kind of a good incentive program for me to be like, okay, well, if I had this going on this day, it helps me kind of build my schedule better, but still catering to like the fact that I have audiences like across the world and knowing that there's a lot of them that do watch my streams who are not always based in the US or my time zone, and trying to just be aware of that.
To move on, do you feel like you've struck a really nice balance between working on covers and arrangements that you personally want to make, and then prioritizing maybe covers that you know that your viewership wants to see? We've kind of discussed this in the first episode, but what are your thoughts and feelings on that?
I would say no. And the reason I'm going to say that is just because I don't take requests. That has always been a huge thing with me. I don't like to take requests. Like on Twitch, like it's one thing when someone's like, hey, can you play this tune? That's an instant, while I might not always be happy with it, it's a moment, versus like a YouTube cover puts like, at least 20 hours into one cover. Like, there's a lot of time that goes into this. So if I'm investing all this time and I don't like it, or I'm doing it just because one person told me to do it, or even if like 100 people were like, hey, I want you to cover the song, I don't care.
Or even like the algorithm, for example.
Yeah, like I honestly don't care. You know, which can sound harsh, but like, you know, my YouTube channel is for me. Like, you know, it's for me to improve. It's a look back, and I love getting to share. But again, how can I really share like, you know, stuff that I'm not happy with? So like, I only cover things that I want to cover. Sometimes that does coincide with what people want, but I'm not like thinking, oh my God, you know, Laughingboy wants to hear me cover, you know, Sandy Bay from Ham Ham Heartbreak, you know, I must do it kind of thing. You know,
well, when are you gonna do it?
I don't know. It'd be cool if I did that. But
for years.
Yeah, I don't think it's sustainable personally for me to like operate on request when half the time I don't know the music, I don't care for it, I don't have a connection, so it makes it harder for me to motivate myself to do the work on it. So you know, versus I've been really happy with the content I've been putting out over the years because they're all things that I really like, and sometimes it does coincide with like, you know, what's hip and happening, as the kiddos say. Like I covered something from the Steven Universe movie like a few days after it came out, but that's because I watched the movie, loved it, wanted to cover it, not like, oh, this would be a great thing because the movie just came out and like I want views. It was just like, no, I really loved this song and I'd love to do a cover of it, and you know, do it now while your motivation's high.
A lot of content creators do kind of fall victim or prey or, you know, slaves to the algorithm, and if they know that a certain game is going to come out, they try to create content based off of that.
Right. And it's hard because it's also like, it's a job, you know, and you do have to make money. So like, I know so many of my friends, like they really try to strike the balance between doing what's popular and then doing what they care about, even though they know it might not do as well. So I definitely,
and there's a lot of fear to that too.
Yeah. And you know, well, could that change over the years? Yeah, because this is starting to become more lucrative than it was when I first started. But, you know, I also think it's important to stay true to who you are, you know, because if fans just want you to cover, you know, certain things, it's like, we can't just cater to everything that you want. And it's like, at the end of the day, then, are you really supporting the artist, or like you're just supporting the fact that they're doing what they want you to, like, you know, they're doing what you want. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm like blanking on it.
No, I do.
Okay.
And it is a topic that we would continue to talk about in the final episode in terms of how does the financial backing of this coincide with the fact that this isn't your only source of income.
Right.
How does that change your opinion on things?
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about that stuff. Honestly, like I'm super excited for that.
I try to find the juicier bits for the last episode.
I think that's smart. You got to reel them in.
That's right. Viewership goes down on the technical stuff. It comes right back up for the juicy bits. What are your thoughts on Game Grumps? That's how old my questions are. All right. So what do you feel like has helped you the most in terms of growing your viewer base? Would you actually even say that it is your dedication to uploading just the content that you believe is important to you at that time?
I would say that's a huge factor of it. I think that, like, you know, just really being true to who I am, you know, people don't see it too much on YouTube, but like on Twitch, like I can be quite harsh to people, and it's only because like my rules are pretty simple. It's like, you know, if like, have respect for me and the people that are in the chat, and if you don't, we have a problem. And like, I can get very mean, and my friends are like, aren't you afraid that that's gonna drive people away? I'm like, it gets rid of the people that I don't want there. I'm like, because if they can't be respectful, you know, why would I want them to be around?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's what kind of helps, like, you know, translating that to YouTube, where, you know, why would I want people around who are just gonna tell me what they want when it's not what I really care about? You know, I don't want those people really around. Like, you know, if what they want happens to coincide with what I do, that's cool, but I don't want to have to go out of my way to cater to people who, you know, someone could suggest that they want to see a cover, and they might not even watch it when you do it. Like, so, you know, why would you use that as, like, your only motivation? They're like, well, this one random person said I should. It's like, well, that's not good. Even if a friend tells you to cover something, like, I don't think that that's necessarily, like, you know,
You don't even watch my show.
Yeah, like, yeah. I think the other thing that's kind of helped, and it kind of it's along the lines of like staying true to yourself, kind of, is one of my favorite quotes I like to tell people when they ask me about like what I do and how I work is good artists copy, great artists steal. Because like original music is kind of a interesting term because like, you know, we're drawing from things that inspire us, whether it's conscious or subconscious. So like if you're gonna like rip someone off, it's like, you know, I think about if you're to like, it's different. Let me think about, let's say I just covered Lost Woods from, my God, Ocarina of Time and like the entire Legend of Zelda series. And I did it in the style of a song called Every Part by a band called Moonchild. It's a really cool tune. And like, you know, I could have copied it verbatim, but, you know, that limits what I can do because I'm just following what that band did versus, you know, all right, I like these elements. Let me take them, steal them, incorporate them, but still have the things that make it me. So like, if you listen to the song and listen to how I started Lost Woods, it's like, wow, that's like really similar. But as the arrangement evolves and it, like the cover goes on, you hear more of like those like Sab Irene bits, I guess we can call them. You can still hear the influence from the track, but I'm just stealing like the general vibe of the thing instead of copying it directly. And I think like, because when you copy, regardless if you copy another cover artist or just another person, you are limiting yourself to what they can do versus incorporating what they do into what you do. You know, it makes a huge difference. Really, it's just the idea of, and I guess this was something that was kind of repeated in an earlier interview where if you just continue to be yourself, people flock to that. Yeah. They want to see you. They want to see like what you're about. Right. And so continuing to just like be yourself and continuing to just promote who you are as a person with your own personal experiences or your own personal touches on things. Right. That's ultimately what's going to drive people and help you grow. For sure. And then finally, what is one thing about creating and uploading a video that you wish someone could have told you before you started doing it? Probably don't care so much about what people think, which I know can seem like quite an obvious one. Yeah, don't read the comments. Yeah, don't read the comments. I mean, because I had a video, like there was like a distinct video that I did, like I was in high school and like I had a snow day, so I was like, oh, record a cover. And I recorded the cover. Was it good? Not really, but you know, someone left a really mean comment and I ended up deleting the video. Because like I just took it really hard. I took it really personally, which don't do with YouTube comments ever. So I just like, I wish I hadn't done that. Because again, was it a good video? No, but it's part of my journey and it's part of my experience where I, you know, to reflect and grow on it. You know, don't care too much about what people think. Like, you know, I started this channel for me. And, you know, that's like, yeah, I do it for myself and I do it to share music with people. But again, like, you know, do I get rude comments all the time? But, you know, I choose not to let them really bother me. And if I find that, like, I'm thinking about them weeks later and I still have, like, that negative energy, I do delete them. But most of the time I end up laughing at them because sometimes I'm like, wow, people will, like, leave mean comments on multiple videos. And I'm like, hey, thanks for the watch time because you didn't like my videos and you felt the need to tell me on several videos. Cool. It makes me laugh. Or I'm like, you didn't just do this once. Like, you did it a few times and, like... Well, yeah. And ultimately it's like, you know, if you keep ruminating on it, then they win kind of thing. But ultimately, for some reason, they decided to take a lot of time out of their day. And we just talked about... Yeah. The most important thing you can give somebody is your time. Yeah. And it's like, why did you, even if it was 5 minutes, why did you do it? Right. So, yeah, I think that's important to remember. And on that note, we are done with all the technical questions. This used to be like 3 episodes. Really? Holy crap. Something like that. It was usually like 2 or 3. And it was a lot of questions that wound up repeating themselves. I feel like I toned it down a little bit. I thought that they were great. I thought there was a great flow to the questions, so. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Next time we'll actually be talking a little bit about other technical things, but we're gonna be a little bit different. So we've talked a little bit about streaming, but we're gonna talk a little bit more and go in depth about Twitch, and how different things are with Twitch versus YouTube and content creation, and then collaborations.
Yay!
So we've already talked about how you are a collaborator, you work well with others, you're a team player, and we're gonna talk about what that's like.
I'm excited.
But until then, we will be back in 2023, probably. Tentative. We'll see what happens. And we'll see you guys then. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.